Hey everyone, I think I had it set to private, so hopefully people start filtering in just a minute. I don't know why, I use the same settings every time, so hopefully you guys can see this and jump on in. Let me just send this off to Discord. Here we go. I think that's gonna be a little bit better with, people actually being able to join. That was frustrating. I don't know what happened. I used the same settings that I normally do, and it didn't go public because it's supposed to go public when I go live. So I don't know what's up with that. Last week we had some issues with it rendering, and then YouTube, it literally took days for it to render and get published, which was frustrating on my end for that. But last week's is now up, so maybe something's up with YouTube, but let's see. Cool. Thank you guys for joining, even though it was difficult to join this time. And welcome to the stream, and I'm glad that sounds good. So today is July 5th. And we're going to be discussing the last match that Ken and I have on the channel, which is basically squad heavy. We both have a very squad heavy list that we're going to be talking about today. It's another iteration of my Plum Coon ideas, and a lot of different experimentation of cards and ideas that I have not tried in the past with my standard, here's a bunch of Y-Wings, have fun with trying to kill them. So that's good. So just so you guys know, there is a storm that's rolling into the area, so hopefully that won't disrupt the stream at all. But it's like a giant red spot that's going to be moving right over me. So hopefully that doesn't disrupt anything. So I guess we could just get right to it. So like I said, we're going to be discussing Season 4, Episode 2 on the stream. So I was playing a Plo Koon list, and unlike my last list, this was an experimentation to see if 2 acclimators would be better at pushing the squads and activating them compared to a Venator 2. And so you have pros and cons to both of those things. So acclimators with expanded hangars each can push 4. With a token you can push 5, which is almost like a Venator. But with the Venator you can push up to let's say 7 if you need to. So either way I can pretty much move most of my fighter ball, but not all of it regardless. So then it comes into the question of what's more efficient, because both of my acclimators are going to have flight controllers compared to just paying it once for what's on the acclimator. Ahsoka Tano I really like in this list because she allows me to snipe things without taking extra damage to more key assets. And with Snipe 2 and then flight controllers, I'm still sniping at 3 with Y-Wings, which make Y-Wings incredible. But she limits it to 3. So it doesn't really matter for her if she's on a Venator or an acclimator. So what's better? Acclimators individually are more fragile. They have less shields and they have less defense tokens and less hull. But not a significant difference compared to a Venator. So then you have to try to realize what's better. If I was playing a Venator, I'd probably have an additional Pelta, so I'd have the same amount of activation. So I don't gain anything in activations there. The Pelta would probably be there to pass shields then over to the Venator, and then Tranquility can do its thing better. But the Acclimator have titles like the Novetta B title that basically operates like a bomber command when I use it against ships. So, and I get rerolls if I throw a Y-Wing in on the Ahsoka shots. So it's hard to say. The other thing that I experimented with this is I've never used them before, the hyperspace rings. So my idea for this list was I could boost up both the acclimators to being Squadron 4. And then I have 8 Y-Wings. So in between my 2 acclimators, I can put out all of my Y-Wings before I even have to put down a ship, which is pretty awesome. I don't know how useful it actually is because most of the times, like, activations just line themselves up anyway, but it might give you a slight edge. At the same time, you want your carrier still to be close to the Y-Wings, and Y-Wings are slow. So if you drop them all in the middle of the table, you have to be kind of on the side and then try to, like, scoot in to get them. So it doesn't really hide your position totally. But that was kind of my goal with that. So I've talked a lot about it already, so we'll just go through everything that's on this acclimator. So it's an acclimator 1. The flagship has Plo Koon, Ahsoka Tano, flight controllers, hyperspace rings, expanded hangar base, linked turbo laser towers, and then Novota B. So the idea here is when I need to kill squadrons off, I can activate 4 squadrons, and 3 of them, if they're generic, get Ahsoka. I only have 1 ace in the list, so I activate that with it. They all get Swarm if they don't have it already, and they get to reroll against ships. Pretty good. I'll take it. That makes it a very potent. I can throw like my ace into the mix to lock things down, and then I can use the snipe to snipe over with Y-Wings or my other squadrons to try to kill off as much as possible. I obviously will be making a change to this list when we come to it at the end, because there's a specific fighter that I would switch out. So my second ship is also pretty much exactly the same. So it's also an acclimator 1 with flight controllers, hyperspace rings, expanded hangar bay, and linked turbo laser towers. So this is where the question then becomes, do you want to have 2 ships versus 1 ship? And I'm still debating it. Like I was saying, the acclimators are used a little bit more. Like they're technically together, they have more health and more firepower, because firing 2 sets of red dice at long range with rerolls is better than firing 1 set. I think a Venator 2 has only 2 red dice, so it's a little bit iffy. And then I have double all the upgrade cards. So hyperspace rings, expanded launch bays, and flight controllers is 14 points. So I have like 30 points now on 2 ships instead of 30 points on 1 ship, or 15 points on 1 ship. So you have to like look at it from a consistency point. It's hard to say. I would actually have to play this multiple times to figure that out better. So then I have a Pelta class transport frigate that's along for the ride. On it, I have Bomber Command Center. And that's to give all of my Y-Wings an additional reroll. So regardless if Novota B activates them or my other acclimator, I get Bomber Command. And that's good because there's just so many dice. It's not as useful now that you have like the point defense ion cannons, but still, like, rolling your blanks into hits is what's important here, not necessarily hits into crits, the double hit. That's fine if they can't re-roll it, but like most of the times it's just maintaining that at least 1 damage per Y-Wing. And because honestly, if you get 1 damage in with a Y-Wing, most people aren't going to have you re-roll that because that's crazy dangerous. They would rather just take the 1 damage instead of the 2 in the crit. So as long as you can land at least that hit, you're scoring damage. And if you can do 8 damage in some 1-point packets against a ship a turn, that's insane. It has reactive gunnery, so you don't want to shoot at it for once. I also have the title that gives you the additional evade. There was a miscommunication and it didn't end up on this, but it's there. So then I have more tokens that should be ready that I can use reactive gunnery on. And it's 2 red dice. Unmodified, so it's 2 blanks for me. But the option is there. Like I would say, I would probably just copy this ship and put it in if I had a Venator, another Venator, and then probably switch out, like, obviously Bomber Command, and I would try to put the projection experts on it so then I could pass the shields over to the Venator, which might make it a little bit more tanky with Tranquility. So it might survive longer than 2 Acclimators, but we would have to see. Okay, let's get to the fighters for this group. And it's pretty simple. I have in this Luminara. And the reason I have Luminara is for her ability right now, and she was the cheapest Jedi ace, so that I could trigger the power with Plo Koon, which is when you have something with adept around, it allows all your fighters to get grit, so I can like unengage all my Y-Wings and then snipe if I really wanted to, or allow them to have better positioning. I have 2 V19s basically to keep Luminara alive. And also Luminara, her other ability is when an enemy squadron at distance 1 of her is attacking a squadron, that attack is treated as obstructed. So like Y-Wings are already 6 damage and then you're obstructed all the time pretty much when she's around is pretty good. And then I have 8 Y-Wings. That's a lot. It's just beautiful. They just fly across the board. The blue-black dice, it's just small pockets of damage, so you're probably going to kill everything off 1 damage at a time. With flight controllers, you might be able to get 2, and they might have to spend a brace, but you're going to get damage in, and you can use them as snipe, and the V19s you can use with Ahsoka snipe, so you're going to be sniping things without being countered, and then they're going to have to move in and try to take out your 6 hull plus squadrons, and Luminara is there to keep it from becoming bad. So my change here would be I would put Anakin in instead of Luminara, mainly because Anakin is a monster at killing squadrons. I haven't decided yet if I would drop both the V19s and keep Luminara, because that would be roughly the same amount of points right there, because I believe Anakin is 24. He's either 24 or 25. Let me find out. I haven't played him too much. He's 24. So I could just drop both the V19s for Anakin. I might do that. That's pretty good. And then just use the Y-Wings for snipe, and Luminara protects the Y-Wings. We'll see. It's like one of those things that you just have to play with. Some matchups it would be better, some it would be worse. But with having Anakin with flight controllers being able to move in, splashing all their damage, and then having the Y-Wings come out and snipe, like you can eliminate an entire like Separatist or Imperial like generic squad ball in like 1 turn, which would be amazing. Without taking any of the counter really too, which is even better. But that's pretty much the list. And it's just move fighters around, move slowly. Your fighters are what's doing your damage, which ships are adding damage, but ships are mainly there to stress non-key defense tokens, and then Plo Koon doesn't care about, like a redirect. As long as you don't have like double tokens, Plo Koon just melts through things. So things like the Republic and the CIS, which don't have redundant tokens, he does extremely well against. He starts not doing as well against the Rebels because some Rebels have redundant tokens. And the Imperial, like an Imperial Star Destroyer, he struggles a little bit more against because there's 2 redirects, and they usually have the ion cannons to re-roll. But for the most part, I feel like he does very consistent damage. So I'm still torn about using just a Venator and another Pelta or keeping it the 2 Acclimators. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'm going to now jump over to the comments, see what people have to say, and then we'll move on to Ken's list. Okay, it looks like I actually have to scroll. Okay, War says Venators can also have weapons that may require Confire tokens, right? While Acclimators, they don't have that kind of weapon, if I'm not mistaken. That is correct, but I wouldn't be taking a spat in this list, because my firepower comes from pushing squadrons, not necessarily a spat, and a spat itself, it reduces your squadron value. I believe it reduces it by 2. So then I would only be pushing 3 instead of like 5, 6, 7. And the whole idea is to activate things with platoon to get into bomber range to kill things. So while a splat would be fun to use, it kind of goes against what this build is doing. John Fisher asks, have you used snipe much with success? And the answer is, I think I have. I've never... When we make matchups, we try not to match up fleets against each other that hard counter each other. So, like if Ken was bringing a list that was all like TIE interceptors, I wouldn't intentionally put this platoon snipe list against it, because that's just not fun. Unless, of course, Ken's like, I want to see what it happens, and then if he accepts the put me through a meat grinder, then that's what we do. We've done that on a couple episodes. Like, oh, this was near the beginning, so probably in the first 25 episodes, people really wanted to see what a Thrawn 2-ship list looked like. So Ken volunteered to fly a list against a Thrawn 2-ship, and it was not a fun matchup. So we sometimes do that, but for the most part, like, I don't think I've ever faced really platoon against a squadron ball that has counter. So I can't say definitely it works. I just like converting Y-Wings to all blue dice in shooting, so I'm not engaged, so then I have more flexibility. So from that perspective of having more flexibility with my movement in where I can position my fighters, I say yes, I've had success with snipe, but I have not been using it against like counter aces or anything like that. Okay, let's see what else. Spat reduces squadron value, so yep, already covered. Unless you're going to split your squad activations up among several ships. Just... Yeah, arc swarms are actually really good with Ahsoka. Corsec 9 is saying, because arcs are already 3 blue dice, or 3 dice. I think there's 1 red in there, so it doesn't count. And then you add in the flight controller, so you're sniping with 4, and it's like the slow thing. So now they get more range, so they can shoot before they normally would. He says that it took someone by surprise, and yeah, that does take people by surprise, because you don't think like these moving 2 squadrons, like moving 2 and then sniping 2 is almost the whole range ruler, which you don't expect from an Archaton. Not an Archaton, an Arc 170. That'd be Ken's in chat. People saying hello. Do you want to know how many times you get the structural? Do I even want to know? Now, Ken basically has drawn it up all the time. He did some math on it one day and was like, there's like a 1 in 6 chance that he draws a structural at any point of the game, unless he's already like, it's a high chance. The more interesting thing is how I always draw projection misaligned, and there's only, I believe, 2 of those cards in compared to like 6 or 8 of the structurals. We do have enough damage deck cards. I should one day just switch it out and give Ken nothing but structurals and see what happens. That would be fun. But it doesn't even matter what deck Ken uses for that. When Ken uses his deck, he gets structurals. When he uses my deck, he gets structurals. When he plays online, he gets structurals. So they just know that it's him, and they try to find him. Okay, so now let's look at Ken's list. And this is a Dodonna list. Ken likes making fleets that fit the theme. So this is like a list that is like what would be in Rebels when they were protecting that planet right as Thrawn's attacking. So Dodonna is sitting on a Nebula B support refit, and it has auxiliary shield teams to help it get a little bit tankier. Spinal armament to add an additional red dice in the front and the back, which is the only angles that you really want to be shot at. And then it has Salvation, which allows crits fired from the front arc to be considered as 2 damage. So with all of that and Spinal Armament, you're probably going to get a crit, and it's probably going to be a lot of damage. So it's beautiful. Also, what's interesting about that is because it's not a critical effect, it's just an effect that happens when you have criticals, you can still then score critical damage. So with Dodonna, the increase of damage causes you to blast through the shields faster. And then if you have a crit, then you can then trigger a crit. So it's a decent combo. Second ship. Pretty much the same thing, except you have Vanguard, which allows you to switch out a token for a redirect. So you would then drop the brace, and then you'd have a redirect, an evade, and a brace. If you want to, or you can just keep your original tokens. It allows you then to add a weapons team slot, which can add a veteran gunner. So with Spinal, he could reroll those 4 dice out the front. Pretty good. Next ship is a Pelta command ship. Peltas are actually one of my favorite ships. Both the Republic and the Rebels. Rebels are obviously more expensive. And if pressed, I would say that I prefer the Republic ones. But they are way tankier than they look. They put out way more damage than they look. Like, they're just usually... people underestimate Peltas. And... like, when you look at it, I always call them like... It's like half a Star Destroyer. For 60 points, you get 2 reds and 2 blues out the front, which is half a Star Destroyer. You get an evade, a redirect, and a brace, so you can like survive some damage. It has 4 engineering, so you can do shield things. It has 3 squadron, which isn't bad. Like, as a whole, it's not necessarily a bad ship. It's just more expensive than the other ships that are in the Rebels. So Rebels prefer to go lighter in ships that are faster. It's slow, but like for the most part, it's pretty tanky. As you saw in the game, it took a couple really hard shots from my ships and my fighters to finally kill it. He has Adar Talon in it, which works very well with the fighters that he has, and we'll go over that in a minute, and boosted comm so he can reach out farther and touch those fighters. He then has a CR90A with the stapled on turbo laser reroute circuits. Nothing really to say here that I haven't said before. It's just what it is. It's good. It's standard. Then let's get into his squadron. So here's his ace lineup. So he has Dash Rendar, Lando Calrissian, and Dutch Vander. Dash has the ability, he's rogue, so pretty much both Lando and Dash are rogue, so they can move and shoot in the squadron phase. Dash has an ability that for every enemy fighter or ship around him, he can re-roll a dice, which is great when you're rolling 4 blue dice. So you should pretty much get the accuracy if you need it, or all 4 dice being damage. Very good at pumping out damage. And then he's Bomber with a black dice, and he can re-roll then when attacking ships as well. Very strong. Lando I just started using, and he's super efficient, especially with Adar, at killing things because of his ability to just chuck his defense tokens out and then set a dice. Something to remember. If you've watched my backseat, it might have been the very first backseat, I go over the attack sequence. And it might be the second one, or third, somewhere in the beginning. The attack sequence has very defined things. So modify dice has a lot of keywords that fall under modify. And both of those are defensive and offensive modifications. What counts as a modification is re-rolling. So that would be an evade. Or point defense ion cannons, or anything like that. That's a modification and can't be done. Also, canceling, which is also a modification, such as the scatter, cannot affect a dice. So if you're attacking a flotilla and you set a dice, the red dice, by chucking your brace out to a double red, that flotilla will take 2 damage because the flotilla can't do anything about it. It can't re-roll it with an evade. And it can't scatter it with a scatter. So sometimes you might be put into a position that you're spending your scatter anyway because his blue dice also came up as a hit. So you don't take 3 damage, but you're scattering the blue dice away, and then you're just left with the red dice, so you take 2 damage. So just something to think about. Then you have Dutch, who Dutch either does 1 additional damage if the squadron's already activated, or it activates the squadron, which is super powerful considering he also has... There should be more slides than that. Hold on. Here it is. It's in a different spot. It's titled differently. Okay. Dutch pairs well with Wedge. Wedge says while you're attacking an activated squadron, you may add 2 blue dice. So what you do is you move in and you hit someone with Dutch, and then you hit them with Wedge for 6 dice after activating them. It's insane. It's a lot of damage. Then you have Adar, and then you can use Wedge again at the end of the round. That's why when we played our game, I focused down Wedge as fast as I could because I knew he was pretty much the biggest threat to my Y-Wings because he could just one-shot a Y-Wing in one turn, and I don't want any of that. And then you could do it twice. No, thank you. Rogue Squadron, it has Rogue, and it can move around and do its own things. Then you have a VCX, so you can reach out from other far away. So with Busicomms and that, you have like distance theoretical, like 7 or 8 that you can get fighter activated if you need to fighter activate them, because almost all of them have Rogue. So the ones that don't have Rogue are Wedge, Vander, in the VCX, which is the exact amount of squadrons that the Pelta can activate. So you should be able to have full control of all your squadrons every turn with Rogue and your fighter complement on the Pelta, which is good. So that leaves the other ships to doing whatever they want. VCX is really handy in case you come up against something with an objective token. You can move it around. So that's what we see happen in this. This fighter ball is actually way deadlier than it looks at first sight. At first sight, you're like, okay, there's some aces, but it's not like anything outrageous. And then all the pieces put together, like the rogue and the rerolls and the setting of the dice and being able to do things twice, makes it very deadly. And it tied up my fighter ball because of so many defense tokens and everything has a lot of health. I mean, when you're looking at this list and the least amount of health thing is Rogue Squadron at 5 damage or 5 hull points, like it's tanky. Lando has 7, Dash has 6, Dutch has 6, the VCX has 8, the Wedge has 5 in defense tokens. Like this is a lot of health to eat through. And I did it like 1 damage at a time with my snipe. So, yeah. It lasted way longer than I thought. And the longer you can tie up my squadrons, the less I can bomb you. And that's where the potential damage from my list comes from. So Ken did a good job of tying me up with that. And then, I'll talk about it when we get to the game. So I'm going to jump back to the comments, see if anyone has any comments or thoughts about either of the lists, and then we'll move into how the game actually went. Okay. Yeah, that is true. The one, if I were to staff the deck, Ken's like, you wouldn't get a crit. I'm like, true. But in that game, when I intentionally stack the deck, because pretty much everything will come in with, what is that, XX9s? The ones that do 2 damage. And then I'm like, man, Ken, you just drew a structural. Next card, again. So that one goes here and then face down because that's an auto damage, and then the next card comes up as another structural, so that's like 4 damage a turn, and he's like, whoa, that's crazy. And then I do it again on the next ship. Like he would definitely know before the end of the game that the deck was going to be stacked. So War says this list looks familiar but is different from his. Is that also... I keep forgetting what the planet's called. It starts with an A that they defend in Rebels. Adelon, that's it. So you also have an Adelon fleet, I take it? Okay, so let's talk about how this game goes. So I don't remember who had bid. It was Ken. Ken had a 2-point bid and chose to go second. Also, I'm sitting right at 400 points, so I would have to find something to drop if I use this exact list and wanted to add Anakin because he's 1 more point than Luminara. Or I just drop the 2 V19s and add Anakin in there. I might do that. It doesn't really change my deployment because I had 11 squadrons anyway, because why be super efficient when you have 11 squadrons. So let's take a look at the objectives that Ken gave me. So he gave me He gave me Precision Strike, which works well because he has things that have bombers and crit effects. And Odana loves, oh, is that something terrible? Let's just flip that card right back up. It's a terrible combination. Capture the VIP. He has the VCX so he can move it around. And he has Intel Sweep so he can also move those objectives around as well, which becomes really irritating when you're like trying to fly to collect the minimum of yours, and then he's just moving it away from you so you can never pick it up. So be careful of that. I've had that happen to me in a tournament, mainly because the other ones were way, 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 way worse. But it's frustrating to just watch your tokens that you're trying to collect move across the table so the other player can collect it. Okay, so I chose, probably no one's surprise, capture the VIP. So my thought process here is it could go one of two ways. It's either Ken just gets 50 points and he flies one of his 4 ships away, which then gives me an advantage inside the combat bubble of what's actually going to be fighting. Or Ken is going to pick it up and then fly into the Hornet's nest of fighters. Then I'll just kill whatever that is, and then no one gets the points. Or I pick it up. So, like, this is the least dangerous to me. And, like, my hope is actually that he flies away with it with one of his ships, because then that ship's out of combat, and then it gives me, like, the advantage inside the fight zone. So here is the deployment. What's nice about the hyperspace rinks is I was able to drop all of my squadrons with that, all the Y-Wings down in the middle of the board first, and that never really happened. So I could put these 2 out here because nothing's on the table, so I can just be 5 away. Ken drops something. These are now 5 away. Then he starts dropping fighters, and that's why you can see why the Y-Wings start moving backwards here. And that's because they have to be distance 5 away from other squadrons. So Ken dropped 2 here, so I had to push my squadrons back. I made a mistake and I put these fighters over here. All my ships are clustered here, and I got to put them down pretty much last. So Ken has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 deployments. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I get to put my ship down last. So when I saw that his CR90 was pointing off this way, I could put this ship down to challenge it and come into it instead of just letting him fly away for free. So Ken would then have to make a decision very early on to either commit the CR90 into combat or to fly it away, because I can come in speed 3 and then sit here threatening it. And so that forces a decision on Ken, which then, depending on his decision, depends on how I go for the next turn. So as you can see here, my ships move forward. Ken has the token, and he's just out of red range here. If he was a little bit closer, the entire game would have been different, because I would have then hunted down this ship. So if you look right here, my fighters are poised that I could jump into it and kill it. All I needed to do is remove the shields on it. That's what I needed to do at red range, but I'm outside of red range. So then I have the decision of, I don't have a shot on it, and next turn it's going to be way over here by where we have the dice, so I'm not going to be able to shoot it unless I disengage my ship completely from the battle. So knowing that Ken's trying to avoid getting, keep it alive, I decided then to fully commit into the battle over here against his squadrons, his Pelta, and his Nebs. Ken's Pelta is leading in, which is good for him because, like I was saying already, it's a super, super tanky ship, and it's going to take a lot of firepower to take down. And, yeah. Then the fighters engage. Fighters die. I get locked down, but everything over here is pretty much heavy, so I can just move around as I wish. You have Lando and Dash coming in over here. Locking down my fighters, and his Nebs are going to just come into the side. I wish I was going a little bit slower, but turning any more would have put me in range. So I was trapped in this, do I get extra shots or do I have guns on them? After this acclimator failed to kill this Pelta, I knew it was dead, so there was no reason to crank it in. Fighters doing fighter things. As you can see, the CR90 is way off to the side, which is what I want. I want it out of combat. I don't want it to be an extra ship with the TRCs doing just plink damage against me. Lots of explosions now. This ship is way off. You have the Pelta, my Pelta now getting pelted by multiple things. He has this terrible double blue flak, which Y-Wings hate. So I need to challenge these ships to move them away from my flak bubble while I'm still now locked down with Ken fighters trying to kill them off. I make a risky play here, knowing that I activate first, and Ken either has to choose to flak my squadrons or basically at this point throw 1 red into my front, which I don't really care about 1 red. And I drop to speed 0. And I think this is really the defining point of the game, because now I got multiple double arcs onto here, so I had a chance to kill this ship. Wasn't a good chance, but it was a chance. And then my fighters got freed, and as soon as my fighters got freed, then they just started eating things. Ken realizes that this ship may survive, and you can see the CR90s now in a position to try to turn into take it out. And ships explode because of Y-Wings and Plo Koon saying, you can't do anything. Boom, 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 especially against a Nebula. It just eats through the sides because you can't redirect it anywhere. So you have 2 brace tokens. I lock down your evade, so whatever I roll, you take. And as soon as I get through that shield, even if I roll a double and you brace it, you're still taking a crit, which sucks, especially when they're all structurals. We were actually talking about it right before Ken drew it off the camera. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to kill you this turn. I'm going to do a lot of damage to you, but not necessarily kill you. And Ken's like, well, if you get a structural, I'm dead. And I'm like, what are the odds? And then we played, and then he gets a structural, and he's dead. So he called it. I didn't. And then, so the last turn, really the only thing that mattered was how I moved this ship. And it's pretty much dead. But I didn't want to move it into a double arc, because then it's very dead, and I wanted to force Ken to shoot it. He kills it. We all fly off into the sunset, and that's the end of the game. So, in score for this game, Ken destroyed 181 points of my stuff, which was an Acclimator, a Pelta, and a V19. I destroyed 347, everything but that CR90, which was holding the 50 points of victory tokens. So the MOV came out to be 116, so a 7-4. So that is pretty much summarizes that game. Yeah, I like Plo Koon. I don't think he's necessarily top tier for the Republic. I just enjoy playing him. There's always commanders in each faction that may not be the best, but you just enjoy playing. So like for the Rebels, Sato is the commander that I like playing, even though he's not necessarily very good. But I'll always be like tinkering and trying to make a Sato list that does amazing. I think Plo Koon fits into that same realm of how other people do it better. I've seen some people talking that they're having success online and things like that with Yularen lists, because then the question isn't, do I take 2 Acclimators or a Venator? It's, I very much so take an Acclimator, and then not an Acclimator, a Venator, and then with Yularen, I'm basically pushing 8 squadrons all at once, and then I have Peltas on the side that are healing my Venator and my squadrons. And I can take smaller squadrons, and then the Peltas can take flight control leader or whatever it is, so I can push my arcs farther forward. So that's good. So like that technically, just raw efficiency wise, is better than Plo Koon, but Plo Koon gets the accuracy, so it's wishy-washy, but like they both have their pros and cons. Luminara is better at keeping big ships alive, which is, as you can see, as soon as you start killing my carriers, I can't command 11 squadrons. I barely can command 11 squadrons with my 2 ships. Like, he definitely can't do it with 1. And the Venator, like, you kill the Venator, I have no way then to push squadrons. So Plo Koon in that sense isn't necessarily better. Obi-Wan usually is in weird fleets, and the fleets that he plays, no one else is better than him to be in charge of. So like Plo Koon's kind of just like he's an okay commander. But I'll keep forever playing and trying to figure out how to use him. It's the same thing with TF. Like, TF is not necessarily a good commander, but I really enjoy trying to make him work. I'm trying to think if there's an Imperial guy that's the same. No, I don't think I have an Imperial that's not good that I just play because I enjoy him. Because most of the Imperial commanders are good. I mean, Constantine, but I just don't like Constantine's effect. So I guess he would be like their niche, little like, always trying to tinker to make him work. But I've talked about it in previous backseats. I don't necessarily want him to work because it's a very negative play experience to control how the other player moves their ships or just gets stuck. So actually figuring out how to make it really successful isn't really on the top of my list of things I actually want to pull off in the game. So that pretty much summarizes things up. If you guys have any thoughts or concerns or questions or things like that, go ahead and throw them into the comments now, and I'm going to take a look through. One of the things that I've discovered is when I was doing multiple fleets with like Madness or how on Command Stack we talk about stuff, I've become very quick at how I'm doing these things, because I used to barely get done with the fleets and everything in like an hour and a half, and now we're sitting at like 45 minutes, and I'm kind of already summarized what I would change with both the lists. So let's see what's going on in chat. Yeah, pretty much every time can you open your mouth and are like, but if it's a structural, it's 100% then a structural. It's like never not a structural. And he's like, I'll survive as long as it's not a structural. I'm like, I wouldn't say that if I were you. And he's like, structural, dead. Yeah. Trying to think. Ken, you're in chat. Are you releasing a teaser for next week's episode in the morning? And how is the Next Madness episode coming? Because that should be coming along soon too. Because I could throw a teaser up if we wanted to. Let me find it. So episode 3 is going to be taking place this week. So I'm going to give you guys, because you're watching it, you're going to get a sneak preview of what this week's episode is. And remember how I said I really like Peltas? Well, I really like Peltas. Look at that. That's a 4 Pelta list. 4 Rebel Pelta list. Kind of excited to see how that turns out. So you guys are getting the sneak preview here. Ken says that there will also be an official teaser that's released tomorrow morning along with Madness. So stay tuned for that. And then, of course, if you're a Patreon member, you can see the Baleverse Garm tomorrow, and then it will be released to the general public on Friday. And let's see, any news from, this is David Thompson, spelled the same way. Any news on Atomic Mass Games and Armada? So the news that we have is they've recently updated / errata the Hera card that came out with the Rapid Reinforcements one. Before, it was like phrased very funny. It was phrased that when you activate Hera, squadrons with escort at distance 1 of her gain the Adept 1. So anything that has a number theoretically can stack when it's given an additional one of the numbers. So Adept 1 plus Adept 1 is Adept 2. So if you use Aodar Talon, left her in place, and just activated her twice, some squadrons might have 2 Adept 2, and some might have 1, depending on movement and things like that. So it became like this, there's nothing in Armada to necessarily designate things that have abilities. Hold on. Sorry about that. I felt like I was going to sneeze and I wanted to spare you guys. So there's nothing like, there's no tokens, and technically you're not supposed to use additional tokens in the game that aren't provided by the game. So like what has Adept 2 and what has Adept 1, it becomes like a difficult challenge to navigate what has what. So they changed it now to, she has a bubble effect that is range 1 and 2, that when the squadron with escort is distance 1 to 2 away from her, they have Adept. So she's now a bubble compared to this weird trigger ability. The other bit of news that we got is that they officially announced that Worlds will take place at Adepticon in 2023. So that's big. Now we have an actual date for that. They haven't announced if there's going to be a last chance qualifier the day before, or how big of an event it is. We don't know any other information about that. A lot of the things that we know that they're doing right now, we don't have any extra information on. For example, like Gen Con is coming up with, Ken and I are both going to be there. Also, our co-host of the Command Stack, Garrett and Ryan, are going to be there. So if you're there, come say hi to us. We'll be all hanging out at the Armada tournament. And we don't know how many World Passes are going to be given away at Adepticon. Maybe 4, but like the last Gen Con, I believe there was 8. It was like one of the higher amounts that was given away. So we don't really know how that's going to do. Also, the day 2 cut, it might just be top 2. It might be something else. That's still not set in stone yet. So while we have more news from like AMG, we don't have all the details yet. So that's really kind of the update on where we're sitting with the news. Yes, that is a lot of Rebel Peltas. I bought a bunch on sale, so I figured I might as well get them to the table. Oh, question for both you and Ken. Have you thought of running a campaign containing both Armada and Legion? Just thought it would be an interesting and unique. Have we? Yes, we have thought about it. One of the issues, though, is time. And in a campaign like that, you have to have it interact with each other instead of just having 2 separate things. So we would have to have the time to plan out and actually like write a campaign. And then we would have to have all the units for Legion ready to go. And I don't think we have that. Like, Ken has a spattering of different units from all the factions. I primarily just have my CIS painted up. So while we're able to make lists that we've played Legion in before, we don't have necessarily enough Legion to do a campaign where we can just be like, oh, we're going to just make something up. We need all 6 squadrons of stormtroopers right now. Between the 2 of us, we might be able to, but it might look a little weird because I have all my stormtroopers painted up red, like Imperial Guard. Like I went like hardcore Crimson Empire for my Empire that I have painted, so they won't really match with like normal stormtroopers. So there's that. That's kind of holding us back with that, and then just the time needed to actually write out a campaign so that it actually mattered that the games were linked together. We're going to Gen Con. Ken and I both plan on trying to be at Adepticon in 2023, regardless if we're part of Worlds or not, just to come. I'm sure there's going to be other Armada events that are going on. Yeah, honestly, I have this fear. It always happens whenever I go to Gen Con. I basically face only people that I know and or in my local meta. So it's going to be probably Ken and me round 1, and then round 2 is going to be someone from like the Chicagoland area, and then like round 3 will definitely be either Garrett or Ryan. So that's going to be fun to look forward to. And it's like these are the people that you practice against, and you're going to go to a tournament, and those are the only people that you're going to be running up against, which is always frustrating. One of the guys at the local tournament that we went to recently, he was talking that one year he faced someone that was in our local area, and then like round 2 he went up against Nathan Koda, who has won multiple world championships, so that went well. And then he went up against another Nick that's I'll say in the greater Midwest region that's also like one of the best players, and he was at the time like rocking two ship before two ship was a thing. So he's like, that tournament went terrible. It was like he lined up against like top 10 players in every single round, like top 10 world players every single round. He was like, that was terrible. I also don't even know how many rounds Gen Con's going to be. I'm hoping for 4, because 4 Swiss is a good place. 3 Swiss, it's like just purely how many seals did I club to get to my top, I feel like. So I'm really hoping that there's 4 rounds, because especially with the top 2 cut, possibly, like you need the top people to be playing each other to get into that top 2 spot. Yeah, War, go ahead, post that to the Legion Discord. We'll take a look at it. Disclaimer, I am not an expert on Legion. Since the last time we've played, they've come out with multiple FAQs and the entire new faction. So I'll give my advice. It might not be worth much. I'm much more knowledgeable on giving my advice on Armada than Legion, but I would be more than happy to take a look at it. So I think I'm going to call it here if no one else has any questions. Like I was saying, we have Madness 6A, the second part of that, going to be released tomorrow with the official teaser for this week's episode, which you guys already kind of got. And then we have our episode coming out on Friday. If you haven't already, you should also check out our podcast that we do, the Command Stack. You can find it on Spotify, and you can have it on Apple, iTunes, or whatever it's called now. Also, you can see we have the recording on our channel. But what we don't have on our YouTube channel is Ryan did an interview with the winner of the second Battle of Hoth, and that is just podcast. So that's episode 4.5, because it's an interview, and that went live today. So you should go take a listen to it. So I think that's it. So thank you very much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed hanging out tonight. And thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I'm John. This is Ion Radio, and you've been watching the Backseat Admiral.